how do you commit to one thing without feeling as though you're going to die? Die on the inside. Maybe you are someone that is drawn to many different interests. Maybe you even classify yourself as someone that is multi-passionate, and you're just constantly finding new things that you are being drawn towards, that you're curious about, that take your attention and have you fixating on those things for at least a period of time, say a couple of months. And maybe because of that, it feels as though there's no particular interest, topic, subject that you can devote your entire being to. And let me tell you, first of all, that when it comes to pursuing a path, you will need to commit to something. But it's not the way that people are expressing it to you, as though you've got to commit to a subject or a topic. And I want to explain in this video what that means and what that is. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Joe Yuli. I'm a philosopher. I help people from all around the world to choose and know their career path with conviction by unearthing what's called a career archetype. And one of the things that happens as I start to work with people is that there's a needed commitment to what it is that they're meant to be doing in this life. But the problem is that the way that we're sort of being shown how to commit to something is backwards. So if you think back to high school, and I went through this myself, years ago, and just watching your different peers, your different friends pursue different paths, knowing that they might have expressed particular dreams. I had different friends that would express their interest in music. I had friends that would express their interest in design and tattooing. Friends who had expressed to me that they had interests in filmmaking. And yet when it came to them choosing the path or committing to one thing, they ended up picking paths like becoming an accountant, becoming a banker, going and becoming a primary school teacher, going and working in the health and medical field and becoming a nurse. And they picked sort of very paths that didn't quite align with their dreams. Not only didn't align with their dreams, they were just kind of completely different areas. And I watched this go on, where people would be throwing their dreams away, throwing them onto the fire just to let it burn. And then they would go and walk in completely different directions. And I remember at the time sort of being confronted with this same sort of choice, like, hey, it's time to pick a particular path, and having many different paths in front of me, many different potentials that I was thinking about. And knowing that on some level, there needed to be some soul in it, like a connection to something deeper than simply like, hey, I'm just going to go and follow this path of becoming a tradie because I know and I heard that they can make good money. And so this understanding that when you have many different interests, what often happens is not only do you not pick the interest that is correctly aligned for you, but also you end up picking a path that is totally outside the domain because it's so hard to find what it is that you're actually meant for. And so I watched all these different people burning and throwing their different dreams away and being unable to find the thing that they're meant to commit to. And because they couldn't find that deeper thing that they're meant to commit to, they ended up committing to something that wasn't going to help them to develop and to grow and to really become the person that they felt called towards, even if they didn't know it on a conscious level. And so one of the things that goes on if you're somebody that's multi-passionate and you're into many different things is that there's a requirement to defend certain passions and interests of yours so that other people don't, first of all, take you off path and take you completely into in another world, another place that doesn't even connect to anything that you're into, and making sure that you hold that safe, because those things that you're holding safe are often the things that are going to give you the thread that is going to connect you to the actual calling itself, the real thing, the real deal. And this particular calling is something that I call the career archetype, which sort of leads me to something else. When people start to think about committing to one thing, they're often thinking about subjects, they're often thinking about topics, they're often thinking about interests. One of my interests, so for example, if you were to have the interest of yoga, you might start thinking, well, I guess maybe I would try to commit to yoga. And by committing to yoga, then I can go ahead and start walking the path. Maybe I can fly over to Bali and do one of these long 100-hour courses and then get certified and then come back and be a yoga instructor, even though being a yoga instructor doesn't totally fulfill you on all these different levels. And this is something that is sort of being drilled into us, where we're sort of given a subject, we're given an interest, and people say, oh, okay, you like to learn, well, maybe you should go and be a professor at a university. And so they start to connect a particular interest to something that needs to be committed to or devoted to. And this is the wrong way to think about it. You need to commit to something deeper, something lower, something more connected to the true nature of who you are and your way of being. And so the way that I like to talk about this is most people are sort of like these model ships in bottles. And so if you've ever seen these sort of collectors, they end up putting these different model ships inside of these bottles. And they spend, hours and hours and hours putting these ships together, but then you end up having this sort of miniature ship inside of a bottle. This is how I see most people's potential. They end up putting themselves into these really, really small bottles where they can't expand. And yet what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're never bottled so that you can actually be a proper size and go and venture out and explore all the 7 seas. And by doing that, it allows you to not only properly express yourself in this world, but also have the ability to grow as an individual, which is so important. And you don't get capped in these particular topic areas or interest areas. So you do need to commit yourself to something. So I'm not here to tell you that you never need to commit yourself to something, that you can go and run in a field and run around the field and go la 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 la, and then all of a sudden everything is and has been figured out and everything is great. I'm very suspect of people that say that you simply need to dream something and you don't also need to pair it with walking the steps of developing and bringing that dream to life. But you need both. And so when it comes to this idea of, hey, I have all these different interests going around, I want to commit to one thing. The one thing isn't committing to the interest. The one thing is committing to a way of being and a way of life. So if you were to let's think about the career archetype of an artist. So think about an artist and what an artist does. So you might say, or maybe like a more superficial level of thinking of this would be, okay, an artist needs to commit to painting. They just need to commit to this particular medium, and that's how they're going to become the best artist possible. And whilst they're going to get good at painting, and whilst that commitment level is going to help them to develop, what they really need to commit to is something deeper. They need to commit to a creative way of life. They need to move towards, hey, I'm an artist at my core, my foundation, so everything is art. It's a worldview. It's a way of seeing things, and it's a way of being. If you were to think about another career archetype, my own career archetype as philosopher, the commitment isn't, hey, I need to go to university and study all the great philosophers. I need to go and study Nietzsche and Hegel and Plato. That is going to give you definite information. That is going to help that career archetype develop. But the commitment is going to segment them in such a way that they're not actually going to get to the core of what the calling is, which is one of the reasons why people that want to commit to one thing but can't are unable to, because there's something about us where we sort of know, like, that's not quite it, that's not quite right. And there's a clicking moment when we find it, and it's really important to know when things have clicked underneath, and we need that click underneath. So for a philosopher, it's not, hey, I'm going to become a scholar on Nietzsche. It's more aligned to, I need to pursue wisdom. And that needs to be at the very bottom. It's in the roots of beingness. It's in the roots of who I am as an individual. If we were to take another career archetype, let's say a designer, once again, it's not about, hey, should I be a web designer or a graphic designer, right? These two sort of distinct types of designers. And so this can give us an understanding of different ways a designer can be expressed. But the thing that needs to get committed to isn't so much web design or graphic design, although that is a decision that you have to make eventually over time. And it gets a lot easier if you're committed to the right thing, which is designer. Underneath, a way of seeing the world. Everything is design. Everything has been designed. And seeing that just in the fabric of the environment, the fabric of reality. And that whole way of life and that worldview is what needs to get committed to, as opposed to, hey, I need to commit to a couple of interests, and these couple of interests, even if you commit to a few interests, there might be new interests that come in. New interests come in all the time, especially if you're somebody that is creative, somebody that is intellectually curious. You're going to get interests just flying in all the time. And so you have to be able to manage all of these different interests and where they sit and where they reside. And it's so important to the vocation, the calling, where you need to be moving towards to know what you're committing to. Otherwise, you end up getting to these different blocks along the way, and these blocks end up hindering you. So, for example, if you were to only commit to graphic design, and then say, for example, you start getting interested in biology, and you're like, no, I'm not gonna look at biology at all. I need to only commit to graphic design. You might have missed sort of knowledge that, when taken in, would give you more of an understanding of the design of the world, which could have been brought in to graphic design itself. And so oftentimes what I see is when people go like tunnel vision on a particular surface level topic or subject area, they can't make these bigger leaps towards really being able to properly express themselves in the world. I remember watching a really great speech by Marco Pierre White, and he was addressing, I think he was addressing some college in the UK, and he was essentially just talking about his path and talking about how he ended up becoming a chef. And one of the points that was brought up by him, or I think someone had asked him, was what makes a great chef? And one of his points when it comes to what makes a great chef is that a great chef always has an extension of themselves on the plate. And you have to remember that Marco Pierre White was this guy who was the youngest ever to get, I think it was a Michelin star, or maybe it was 3 Michelin stars, whatever it was. And one of his points for a great chef was that they have to have an extension of themselves on the plate, which leads me to another thing, which is that your interests are in some way communicating to you, hey, I have something to show you about who you are as a person. I have something to show you about who you can be as a person. One of the things that I end up doing with people in the Unearth community, which is this place where I help students to unearth their career archetypes, is I tell them to go and look at their favorite movie. Go and look at your favorite movie, or even your top 3, and go and look at your favorite character within that movie. Oftentimes you're being drawn to that character because there is something within that character that is telling you about who you are as an individual and how you need to develop yourself and in what ways you need to develop yourself. It's very common for, say, for example, people that want to be more courageous but can't be more courageous. They're suddenly drawn to a character who has gone through that particular journey or that particular path. It's as if the movie is telling you or giving you an instruction guide on like, hey, these are the parts of yourself that you need to develop, and this is the type of path that you need to walk in order to become yourself, in order to further develop who you are. And so all these different interests, if you don't allow them to in some way penetrate your being and in some way come into consciousness, what ends up happening is that you miss out on further understanding who you are. Now, on the flip side, is that if you don't commit to anything, you end up never becoming anything at all. And so the commitment part is always, hey, I need to commit to the base, the bottom, the soul level. I call it the career archetype, but really it's like a way of life and a way of being, that when you truly step into that, you can develop yourself in such a way where it feels expansive, it feels like you're growing, and you can see that growth in real time. And at the end of that time, or at the end of your mortality, you can look back and say, oh, I became the person I needed to become. So the commitment is deeper than simply, hey, let's pick a subject at university or college and do a degree for a few years. It's deeper than that. It needs to go deeper. Otherwise, there's a lack of rootedness in what it is that you're meant to become. And then there's also a capping of your potential, like that bottled ship. You end up just staying hindered by the glass, and you can't go and explore all of the different seas. And so you need to make sure that you allow these different interests to come into your sphere whilst knowing exactly what you're rooted in. And if you know that, then you can properly navigate your path and allow interests to come in without taking you off path, and still stay committed, still deepen yourself, still master your craft. And so there is this necessity to do the personal, deeper inner work in order to make sure that you are aware of what it is at a soul level you need to be committed to. And that only comes through deep introspection. Deep introspection, there's a little bit of hey, you need to understand this sort of feedback that you're getting from the world. If you express yourself in some way and somebody doesn't like that, you need to know why, right? If somebody doesn't like it, but you don't care that they don't like it because it doesn't matter to them, it doesn't matter to you, then that's okay. But if you have no idea, then you need to understand that, because if you don't understand that, then you're going to go and walk through life ignorant, and you don't want to be ignorant. But most of the work is done in this introspective level of like, who am I as a person? What is my personality makeup? What are the different psychological barriers that are hindering me? Maybe you went through some shit when you were younger and you still haven't gone over that and got over it, and also just worked on it and healed it. And so there's this necessity to connect into who you are as an individual, so that you can then connect to and commit to your true nature. And once you commit to your true nature, then it's not a matter of, hey, I need to pick one thing. Then you're actually able to commit to yourself, commit to your true nature, commit to a way of being. And you're never going to feel like you're dying inside. You're going to feel alive. You're going to feel like you're moving forward, and you're going to be able to grow from that state. And if you're interested in learning more about how I help people to choose the right career path with conviction, you can go ahead and check out the Unearth membership. And inside that membership, I show people how to navigate their path. I show people how to avoid temptation paths. We quite literally have rituals where we get rid of these different temptation paths and burn them away. And then I show people different perspectives on how to properly tune into themselves so that they can know the right career path with conviction. And so if you're interested in that, I'll leave a link underneath this video.